Okay, today on the podcast, I'm joined by my friend Carol Wood. She's the founder of Emerge Media Group, and she's been in local media for a long time. And we've had many calls and been trying to get on the podcast, and we've finally made it happen. So, Carol, thank you very much for coming on the show.
Good morning, Paul. It's great to be here. Thanks for providing the opportunity. And I love your show, so I'm
Thank you.
happy to be on it.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Okay, let's set the frame, kind of like I do in every show. If you could just tell me and the audience just a little bit about your background, your career, what's led to where you're at today. Love to hear it.
Sure. Like you said, I've been in local and hyperlocal media my entire career. I started out in editorial. I cut my teeth at the Rocky Mountain News, cops and crime reporter, and I love that work. And then I moved to local media elsewhere in the Denver area, Denver Business Journal. Spent some time at the group that owns the Denver Post and now Alden Global Capital, Digital First
Mhm.
Media. But it was from the Denver Business Journal that three of us left the Denver Business Journal and started our own regional business journal company. And so while I started out in reporting and research as a business owner there, I very quickly pivoted to how to run that business and how to keep it alive. And that company is now called BizWest Media, and it's still thriving. It's been, I think last year hit its 30th year. I sold my part a few years ago and got out. But my former business partners still run it. I'm still friends with some of the people who've worked there much of those 30 years at that business journal group. And the thing that we learned, and I learned there, is if we had a dime for every mistake we made running the business, we'd be millionaires. And so over time, I wanted to take what I learned there and also following up, going to, doing business education classes and whatnot. I wanted to take that knowledge and share it with other media organizations so that maybe they could avoid some of the same pitfalls that we did. And one of the places where I spent 3 years as a full-time employee doing that was the Colorado Sun. At the time, it was still pretty much of a startup news organization. I was their first chief operations officer and spent 3 years doing that. And during those 3 years, I really came to find that, well, first of all, I would get a lot of phone calls and emails from other local news organizations around the country that, needed help with their operations. And so I came to believe that I could be of more service to our industry by working with as many news organizations as possible and not just one. So I started Emerge Media Group, where I do fractional chief operations officer work for local and hyperlocal media organizations around the country. And that looks like a lot of things. It looks like dipping in and fixing something that's not going well for a publisher. It can look like spending several months working with an organization that really doesn't have an operations manual or an HR manual. Somebody might need help with finding E&O, errors and omissions insurance, or libel insurance. One of the things that we've been able to do is get group rates for small publishers because that's really
cool.
expensive. Now, understanding that every publisher has a different risk factor.
Right.
So, when you're looking to get that underwritten, they look at the risk of different but we're able to get group rates for a lot of them. And so that makes a big difference for a local organization. And you really can't apply, if you're a nonprofit, you can't apply for a grant unless you have E&O insurance or libel insurance. So it's those sort of things that we do. I've helped publishing companies work on their trust project, not Sally Lehrman. Sally Lehrman has the trust project. But when I say that, work with organizations like hers. Reporters Without Borders has the Journalism Trust Initiative, which is the equivalent of what used to be the blue check mark on Twitter, right? You can get a check mark by going through an intensive audit process on your ethics, your trustworthiness, your ethics policy, and how you vet your stories, how you report your stories. And so working to help local and hyperlocal news organizations get their trust verification is something that we do.
Yeah. No, it clearly shows your expertise. I think that's the first time on this podcast anybody has ever mentioned E&O insurance. Is that what it was?
Yes.
Or the last part you were talking about? I've never even I've said a million times on the show, I'm not from a journalism background. I didn't even know that was a thing, but it makes sense. It's really cool you've gotten the group rates too. I just in the small business world, I'm
Mhm.
part of some groups that do that with like health insurance for like entrepreneurs because it's a big barrier to getting in. So kind of similarly, that's a huge benefit.
That's
That's really
part.
cool.
Yes, exactly. That's included. Also, a lot of health insurance or benefits, a 401k or just so that local and hyperlocal publishers can be competitive. And that's
Yeah.
hard right now. One of the things that works really well, especially here in Colorado where you and I are, is there's great innovation in Colorado around collaboration.
Hmm.
We have the collab, the
I can't remember the full title of it. I know it's collab.
Colorado News Collaborative.
That's it. Yep.
And that is an outstanding organization, has nearly 200 members around the state, 200 publishers, not limited to print and digital, but also radio. And the Colorado News Collaborative really leans into local news organizations being able to share stories.
Hmm.
There was a time when Colorado News Collaborative had a grant to work on business and operations for its members. They contracted with me to work with Colorado News Collaborative members on their operations. And unfortunately, that grant ran out. But one of the ways that the work that I do is really successful is if multiple news organizations can come in and share the cost or the expertise, right? So you might have a, a, a a group of publishers who know each other, and one person needs something in their operations toolkit and another person needs something else, and we can work together. They can pool their funds, and I can serve as a fractional COO, because most of these local and hyperlocal news orgs cannot afford a full-time C-suite.
Hmm.
And that's not just limited to operations, that's limited to other C-suite functions. So oftentimes you have the publisher and or the editor trying to fill those. And it leads to a capacity problem because they have other parts of their business and news organization and news gathering that they're working on. Or maybe the publisher is also the editor, is also the reporter, is also putting things up online, and they know exactly what they need to do. I've
Hmm.
never run into a publisher who doesn't know what they need to do in terms of running their business, but almost every publisher I run into does not know how or does not have the time and the capacity. So that's where we come in and help with that. And one of the things that I love about it is because I came up on the editorial side and then shifted to the business side, is I understand the totality of our business and of our profession and how important one part of that equation is to the other. They can't
Right.
exist one without the other. So I really I love it. I love the work that I do and the different publishers, not just in Colorado, but around the country that I get to work with. And it's not limited to, operations work. One of my jobs that I've done the past almost 2 years, and there'll be a third year to it, is working with Rocky Mountain PBS, which is the largest, Channel 6, largest regional PBS station in the Rocky Mountain region. And they're running a project called Above the Noise that's on community engagement and going around the state of Colorado and engaging with small communities and the news organizations in those communities on how to raise trustworthiness in news. So they hired me to project manage that. So that's not exactly operations, but I can come in and manage that project for them across the state. We were in Montrose, I
Shout
think
out Montrose. That's where I'm at.
yes, in 2025, early 25, I believe. And we partnered with the Montrose Business Times. Tanya Maddox, the publisher down there, she does amazing work.
She does.
So Rocky Mountain PBS came in, partnered with Tanya. PBS would provide the venue, the snacks, and then both PBS and the Montrose Business Times worked to drive community members to the meeting space and talk about what in that community needs to be covered. And then Tanya and her editor, Justin, could take that feedback and work to meet the needs of the communities. It's that thing where you don't want to parachute into a community and tell them what they need covering, but you want to listen and do these listening sessions and then meet the needs of the community. Tanya has taken that concept and absolutely killed it in the Montrose area with listening sessions and meeting the needs of the community. So that's something, just an example of other work we do that's not really operational, but I can come in and help an organization project manage something that they might not have capacity to do that also
Right.
really serves the community. And I think for me in local and hyperlocal news is what can we do to what can we do to create informed communities? Because if we don't have informed communities,
Yep.
then we don't have engaged community members who
Hmm.
are listening to or going to a library board or a planning commission or a city council. We don't have community members who are willing to step up and take a role in some sort of community activity, whether it's local government, whether it's activism, whether it's serving the community that you are part of through a nonprofit. So I think everything that I do leads back to how can we drive informed communities across the country and how can we involve local news organizations. And if we can't keep those local news organizations thriving and alive, then we have the news deserts that we all talk
Yep.
about, and certainly that Medill School at Northwestern has written about extensively. Penny Abernathy there did the study, and we've lost 3,500 local newspapers have closed
Yep.
in the past 20 years. More than 200 counties across the country
Yep.
have no local news source at all. And so that's almost 50 million Americans,
Yep.
1 out of 7 who live with limited or no access to local reporting. And so that's, I think, what drives me in the work that I do. And the thing about the local and hyperlocal media is you have really fantastic journalists, great journalists and great editors who know their craft. And
Hmm.
great journalists and great editors make very poor business people.
That comes up a lot on this show. Yep.
If somebody like me or someone else who does what I do can come in and be that partner and that co-creator, even for a short amount of time, dip in, dip out, and be there if they need something that, they can call me back if something comes up. So to be able to be that partner for news organizations is what I do, what Emerge Media Group does.
Very cool. That's great. I agree the importance of it when you don't have engaged community members. What I see happen and also another thing is that this is the first time on this podcast I've heard a case study from my town, my Montrose, city of 20,000 people in Western Colorado. So shout out to Tanya once again. But
Yes.
but anyway, what I see when you don't have the engaged community members, and I could speak to this like here, if I go on Facebook and there's like a school board meeting coming up and people are not informed, they revert to like the ridiculous national narratives and slog. I'll go on and see like about the school board, and people are just arguing like this candidate is a Gestapo bootlicker. Oh, this one is a radical Marxist. I'm like, come on, guys. Like I've read their like what they're running for. I've heard them speak. So that's like what happens. It's one thing I see happening in my own life, at least.
It
Yeah.
is what happens. It happens on Facebook. It happens on any social media platform, on Nextdoor. And a lot of that is misinformation,
Hmm.
accidental misinformation and parroting
Yep.
of
That's what it is. Parroting. I
things
like
that
that.
people don't take the time to understand, vet, and research.
Yep.
And then there is a percentage that's intentional disinformation.
Hmm.
And that's something else that in our profession we need to guard against. And that's one of the reasons that I really love working on trust projects with, like I said, the Reporters Without Borders, their project called the Journalism Trust Initiative. And it started in Europe. They're based in Paris, but they do work in the US now. And then, like I mentioned, also Sally Lehrman, who started the Trust Project. And there's really great news organizations that are starting to get, I guess I'll say, certified or vetted. And it's not a one and done. It is a lot of work. And again, it's something that a publisher or an editor doesn't really have the capacity to do. With the Journalism Trust Initiative, that's a 3-year process. You don't just get it. You have to, like I said, go through these auditing processes. If you're missing something, if there's a gap, if you don't have an operations manual, then you need to have somebody make one for you, write an operations manual for you. So that's where somebody like myself comes in. And again, that can be a very collaborative process with a publisher, but they don't have the capacity to do it. Another example of things that we've come in and worked on, in addition to doing some operations work for Colorado News Collaborative, is, I believe it was in 2024, Colorado lost a printing press down in Pueblo. It was run by Gannett. And we had about 6 or 8 weeks notice that that press was going to close. And there was 80 publications, 80 local and hyperlocal publications that used that press. And so I was part of a team that had to scramble and find new printing presses, a new printing outlet for 80 publications. Some of them went to New Mexico, some went to Nebraska, some went to Wyoming. A few were able to move up to the Denver area. And then I co-authored a study with the Colorado Media Project that looked at the need for printing presses in Colorado, and the National Trust for Local News came in and planted a new printing press in Denver, which
Whoa.
is odd, right? We would not expect that to be a something that happens very often in our profession, and indeed it doesn't. But that printing press has really helped take up the slack for the one that closed in Pueblo in 2024. So those are, a lot of it is behind the scenes work. A lot of it can be grant writing. It can be authoring studies. It can be behind the scenes work, but that hopefully helps move forward informed communities.
That's great. That's great. A little bit more about what you do. When you first were kind of explaining your work, you said that you mentioned that you'll drop in and I don't remember the exact wording you said, help people with something that's not working in their organization. You know, in 2026, things are changing so quick. Like, what are the top couple things you hear? Like, are there emails you get? You're like, oh yeah, I have a pre-written response to this one. Like, what's the top
Yeah.
things
Oh,
I'll let you take it.
great question. And I don't have any pre-written or preconceived emails or there's some templates for work that I do, but I would say the thing that happens to come to the top the most is updating an operations manual or an HR manual,
Hmm.
or again, finding insurance. And a lot of these news organizations, they might have things, but they have not touched them since pre-COVID.
Right.
And from my perspective, there's nothing that you can take, no data, no manuals, no anything that you can take that were done pre-COVID and still consider them to be useful. So it's just really getting everything up to speed and keeping things current for a publisher, or maybe there's a new owner. You had a guest on not too long ago who had Isthmus, the
Yeah.
alternative weekly in Madison.
Jason.
Right. And so, I really liked his example of an organization that basically went out of business.
Mm-hmm.
And he came in and started it fresh and as a nonprofit, I believe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so it's working with folks like that. There's another organization in Colorado that is doing the same with a publication that essentially went out of business last year. And there's a group working to revive it as a nonprofit, almost a exact same case study.
Hmm.
And so it's working with folks like that in that group. There happens to be folks who don't have a lot of business experience. So great journalism experience, not a lot of business experience, maybe a little bit more than Jason was talking about, but working with groups like that on reinventing a publication that they might be trying to revive. And, work with for-profits and nonprofits. I do know that if you are a for-profit organization, an LLC, that is not making money, becoming a nonprofit does not automatically make you money. It is a lot of hard work. You still have to have a good business mind in there. You still have to have somebody, it almost really changes the equation because you have to have someone who will work to write grants for you. You have a board in place that the publisher or the editor now needs to interface with. And you don't want a board that's just going to be staffed with yes people. You want a board that is going to give you constructive pushback on how you were running your business that wasn't making money, and how are you going to now run your business that you want to make, be profitable as a nonprofit. And there's another organization I sit on the board of that's in that situation. They recently flipped to a nonprofit, and they did have a board in place, and being a board member is hard work. You have to be willing to take the time to dive in, to look at the financials, to understand financials, and to work with the publisher on how to make things better. And so that's something else I really do like to do. I sit on some boards. It's all volunteer to help organizations become healthier.
Hmm.
So that's another place where I can be effective in a teamwork environment with other board members.
That's awesome. That kind of helps me with leads into my next kind of question from what you were saying. You said that, you're primarily like a fractional COO, I guess, is how you'd frame
Yes.
yourself. Um, like say somebody's listening and they're like, Carol's one smart cookie. I'd love for her to come in and help me. What's the scope look like? Is it like you come in and you're full-time hands-on COO with folks, or is it there like a way where people can get you for an hour a week or something like that? Like what does that make sense? What's that look like?
Yeah, the
Yeah.
latter,
Okay.
and great question. I haven't encountered the former yet. Now, could I do that? Probably, but I also, don't wanna put other clients off
Right.
in to the exclusiveness of one. Now, if that were necessary, we could definitely work around it, but it always looks like this. It starts with a few conversations, no, just conversations like you and I are having. Free, above board, no charge. Let's see what you've got. Let's see what your highest needs are. And then maybe pick the top three. You can come up with 10 needs, but pick the top three that are really going to make a difference for your business. And I can identify those pretty quickly. And I, like I said, most publishers can too. They know what they need to do. It's having the capacity or just a team member, a partner who can come in and devote a few hours a week to getting something done and done quickly, getting them up to speed so that they can apply for the next grant, or getting them up to speed so that their financials maybe start to look a little bit better or a little bit healthier. And also bringing in partners. I have great resources for websites. There's a lot of still really surprisingly non-functional websites out there that publishers
Hmm.
have. And they just haven't had time to, or the money to flip over to a new functional website. If you want to do a newsletter, I can, there's 2 or 3 different partners that I work with that can really help you get a good newsletter together. Same with a podcast, you know, that sort of things. The operations is a lot of different things. It's
Mhm.
looking at every single vertical in your business, what you already are doing and what you want to do and how to make those cross-functional.
Yeah,
And so that's
that's
what
cool.
I
The framework I've heard and kind of businessy stuff is you want the visionary and the implementer, and journalists by nature are kind of visionaries. So
yes.
you're a hands-on implementer to come in and help with all that stuff.
Yes, and
Yeah.
if I'm not the right implementer, I know everybody who is. And
Yep.
so that is also really useful because there's a lot of sources and resources out there that publishers again might not have the time to interface with.
Right.
And I think folks like you and I know a lot of people in that realm that we can pretty quickly solve a problem for a
Yep.
publisher.
Yep. Yeah, this podcast has been great for me. Like meeting people, I'm like, oh, I can point people to all kinds of stuff like that too.
Yes.
It's fun ecosystem. So that's a fantastic background on you and what you do. I recently had on the show Todd Lanfried
Yes, my colleague.
episode. I looked it up before we hit record. Episode 84. If anybody wants to go back and listen to it, it's really cool project at N2 Media Holdings, and the local, I think, is the name of the project, like a streaming thing. And you're kind of involved in that too. So could you tell me a little bit, there's kind of the deeper dive on the whole project, but could you tell me a little bit about your involvement with it and like
Absolutely.
your thoughts on it? Yeah.
It's a place that I'm spending a lot of time right now. And yes, Todd Lanfried is the CEO. He's in California. This is a California-based project. It's California-based, but a national project. And I'm on the board. I'm the senior vice president of news operations for Into Media Holdings. And yes, the product is called The Local. It is like all of my board positions. It's volunteer. What we are going to do right now, there's 10 of us on the board. We've been working on this for intensively for the last year and a half, I would say. And the goal is to, again, going back to local and hyper-local and serving community members and serving them with trustworthy news. So this project would take local and hyper-local news originally reported by the local employees and others, we'll get to that in a moment, and put it on a streaming platform. So think of your top streaming platforms: Netflix, Amazon, Apple Plus, Disney, Hulu.
There's a million of them. I'm seeing my
Yes.
Roku screen.
Yes, exactly. So producing on a daily basis, a daily news, it's not a broadcast, but let's just say a daily news drop, and think about a favorite show that you like to stream on Netflix. You can go in and click an icon and just play that. This concept is the same. You go in and you put in your zip code. This is not DMA based, not DMA ratings based. It is zip code and geography based. And you would put in your zip code and get that day's local and hyperlocal news for your state. You have a
Mm-hmm.
family, a friend, a relative that lives in another state and another zip code. You want to see what happened there? You put in that zip code and get that daily news drop. We ran a pilot in Colorado, fourth quarter of 2025. It was highly successful. This is not anchor based. It is not set based. It is full-time employees. We have in Colorado, we would have bureaus in Denver, Colorado Springs, and Grand Junction covering local and hyperlocal news across the state. Now, the way it would involve others, and I really like this part of it, is we won't have a reporter in Montrose, but there's stuff that happens down there.
Mm-hmm.
So we could call Tanya at the Montrose Business Times or the local at the daily paper in Montrose. We could call somebody there and say, hey, could you cover this for us? Have your reporter turn their iPhone around, shoot some video, do a voiceover. And then, we pay $500 or $1,000 for that story to that
Right.
news organization. Here's the way I see that. The local and Into Media Holdings could help shore up local and hyperlocal news across the country.
Mm-hmm.
If you do 5 stories a year for the local Colorado, there's $5,000. That means you don't necessarily have to jump through hoops and apply for a $5,000 grant from some news organization that you
Mm-hmm.
may or may not get. The local is a privately held for-profit company that would pay existing local news organizations for content they're already doing. And they don't have to apply for a grant. They don't have to do, grant reporting. They don't have to spend all kinds of time knowing that we may or may not get this $5,000 grant. So we would pay local news organizations to already do the job that they do best. So in addition to having full-time local employees around the country, the plan right now is the next pilot goes to California and then we go to Georgia. And we are looking for private investment to help fund those pilots. We also, at the same time, we're multiple conversations in with some of these streaming platforms. And then a streaming platform ideally would pick it up. Right now, Netflix spends $250 million on a 15-episode show.
It's crazy.
It is. To run a year of the local across the entire United States would be about 200 million.
Jeez.
So and then we can meet news consumers where they're at. You turn it on, you can say there's 10 stories that day, plus local weather, and not just nowcasting, but forecasting. For the pilot, we partnered with a really great group of meteorologists based in Tennessee who would do forecasting for each of the locals across the country. You had a guest on, I believe, from New York, who was really focused on local sports. We would have local sports and, not just the college level, but again, community members want to see and hear about their kids in high school level, right? And, middle school, high school. So local sports, good weather forecasting, and hyperlocal news. So we are deep into that project. I'll share the website to that, and I'm sure that
Yeah.
Todd do an episode 80,
Yep.
84. It's really worth looking at. I think that this will be a year of transition and launching of some of the other locals across the country.
Super cool. Yeah, I think on the episode with Todd, I called it's like one of my favorite ideas I've heard on this show. I'm like, it's like a win-win-win-win. The streamers get an engaged audience.
Mm-hmm.
In my recliner at home gets hyper relevant information to me.
Right.
And 2 gets the streaming contract, and the local newsrooms get supplemental revenue coming in.
Right.
It's just
That's
like the coolest idea. Yeah. And
that's the part of that win-win-win
mm-hmm.
is the platform already exists. So the news organization does not have to build it. The advertising and monetization already is there. So the news organization does not have to do that. The delivery system is already there. So by partnering with a streaming platform, all of the infrastructure is already there. And we are meeting community members where they're at. That does not mean that some community members still are not at a newspaper or still are not at a website, but it does mean a growing sector of the news consumption economy is on a streaming platform. So when we have business models that aren't always working or are failing or breaking, why not look at an entirely new business model to deliver verified news, locally reported news to media consumers? And so, like I said, I'm really leaning into this project right now. It's one of the favorite things I'm doing.
Yeah, it's so cool. Very cool. I also think it's smart to focus on the weather and the sports, because that just reaches even a broader, our football team in Montrose was crazy good this year. They won every game like 58-2 or something like that. And my kids are 4. I don't really care. And by the end of the season, I was like looking up like the score lately. So it's a good way to hook people in. And obviously, everybody needs to know the weather.
Right.
Um,
Everybody needs to know the weather. And, by the other thing too with the streaming platform is, let's use Kansas as an example. Say we have an implement dealership up in Northwest Kansas. She doesn't have a way to advertise her business anymore because
right.
there's a news desert. There's
hmm
no paper within several counties for, that dealership. And their DMA, their Nielsen rated DMA is 400 miles away. So
hmm
why would they advertise on a TV station 400 miles away? So I also see this as a way where local retail can have a way to have ads on a national streaming platform, but it's just focused on their zip code and, kind of on that geolocating. And so there's a lot of different opportunities, not just for news consumers, but also for business people.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really cool. Yeah, the DMA thing also came up on the episode with Todd. I know I've mentioned Montrose more in this episode than all the previous episodes combined, I think. But, I'm in Montrose, Colorado. You're in the Denver area.
Yes.
You're in my DMA. We're
Yes.
probably a 5.5 hour drive from each other right now.
That's right.
That is like not relevant to where I'm at out here. And I think
Right.
folks in the big urban centers kind of forget that sometimes, just how big of a country it is. So solves all the buckets. It's a really cool project.
It does. And again, that's understanding that not every area, we have this in Colorado and certainly every state does. There's areas where broadband infrastructure is still very, very poor. So do
hmm
we still need print publications? Yes. Do we still need, this is in addition to, and just thinking differently about a way to deliver news to media consumers.
Right.
And creating informed communities.
Yeah.
And also, you think about it in terms of demographics, right? There's a much, in a lot of the surveying we've done, uh, the demographic that would throw this on or have their Netflix up and put their zip code in and see what's going on in their local area, it's a very different demographic than the one who's picking up a print product.
Yeah. 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 It's my wife and I,
Yeah,
like late 30s, early 40s, like parents, like that's where I'm going when my boys go down to sleep at night. You know what I mean? So very
I
cool.
do.
So you listen to the podcast. I ask everybody about AI, and I was thinking people might be getting tired of the question, but it changes so fast that I feel like I'm just going to keep asking it because people are doing different things all the time. So curious your thoughts on AI, and you're in a cool spot where you see a lot of different organizations. Like, how are people using it? How are they thinking about it from what your conversations and everything?
Yeah. So, two things. One, my personal view
hmm
is absolutely use
hmm
AI. Use it ethically.
Yeah.
Use it in ways that enhance your workflow, that are not writing your stories, right? And I hear this on your podcast and from people I work with,
Yeah.
is find the efficiencies.
Yep.
Have it help you create your every Thursday top 10 list of things to do in your community for the weekend. Have it, give you help write a headline, give you an idea that you think, I didn't think of that,
Right.
and I can maybe help improve my headline in this way. So use it to find efficiencies. It must be in your ethics policy. That's something I work on with organizations also. You must have a clear and defined ethics policy. And within that, you're going to have a section on AI. One of the ways I think about this, Paul, is why in the world would any publisher want to be back in 1998 thinking the internet's not going to be a thing? It's
Right.
not going to take off.
Yep.
Why do we need a website? Why do we need to adopt this new technology? Because the way I've been doing things has always worked. Why would we want to do that again with AI? And so for publishers who don't think about it, don't think about ways to ethically embed it, that don't educate their staff, and that's your entire staff, your editors, your reporters, your researchers, your videographers, your every aspect of your company. You can't just say, we're going to use AI and you can only do this. You have to
Right.
sit down and take time. And that's something we do too you know, take an hour, have a seminar, let people ask questions. Can I do this? Can I do that? You can't just throw this stuff at a reporter who already is over capacity and doesn't know exactly, could I do this or could I do that? And so you have to have the ethics policy, but yes, use it, use the tool and
Yep.
don't get stuck. And I remember back in the late 90s when, a news organization, they would have a really great story, but they would not put it on their website until after the print publication came out. So it had to be in print before you could put it on your website. And I don't
Right.
know if you remember that, other publishers might. And it was so backwards. Now you get everything out online first or
Yeah,
your
definitely.
newsletter. And, if it hits the print publication, it's a recap of what's already been online. But, in the late 90s, the resistance to the websites had that system in the opposite. It was upside down. So
Right.
you couldn't publish a story that hadn't been in print first. So
Yep.
yeah, let's not do that again.
I like your take. The way I've been thinking about it lately, and I'm very much an optimist.
Mhm.
So maybe not everybody thinks of it. The way I've been thinking about AI lately is like the last 20 years when Google and Meta and everything came around is like the Empire Strikes Back, like this evil empire comes. And now I think a lot of publishers are worried it's going to be more of the same with AI. I'm like, no, this is Return of the Jedi. This is like these tools are going to increase efficiencies,
I like that.
reduce time and bandwidth for you cheaper than it's ever been done before. Plus, you have this local moat of, AI can't steal information it doesn't have access to, like
Good.
without you. So that once again, I'm an optimist. That's the way I hope things play out and
I
everything.
like that way of thinking, and it makes me think of another kind of case study. There is an outstanding Hispanic publication in the Denver metro area. It's been around 50 years, Lavos. And the publisher there, she had the foresight a couple years ago to write and received a grant to have 50 years of publications, of print publications that had never been digitally archived. So that grant is solely to digitally archive
Mhm.
all of the past issues of that Hispanic publication in the Denver area. When you think about the demographic that feeds information into and puts information into AI, it is not a legacy Hispanic publication. So by the fact that she got this grant and that's what's happening with her
Mm.
publication gives you, if we do more of that, then you get different results from AI. It's not just from the demographic that we think of that
Right.
is feeding AI. So let's take all of those legacy publications. Let's take BIPOC publications and get them digitized and make them part of the answers that somebody receives when they put a query into their chatbot. There's a really great organization in the Denver metro area also that I wrote the initial grant for. It's called the Colorado Ethnic Media Exchange. And
Yeah.
it's a collaboration of maybe a dozen right now BIPOC owned or BIPOC serving publications they formed to collaborate on the business side of things, to share advertising, to share operations type work. And so the content of those publications, if we get stuff like that digitized and get it into AI, then again, it becomes part of the answers that people receive back and it deepens, it
Hmm.
deepens the answers. It's
Yeah.
not just the one demographic that is associated with.
Right.
the chatbot world.
Yeah, that's a cool organization. It's come up a couple times. I had a call once with I think it's Brittany.
Yes, Brittany Reedfield.
Yeah, she's great. So
She's
shout out
outstanding.
Brittany also.
Yeah, she runs that organization now. She's the
Does
point
she?
person for the Colorado Ethnic Media Exchange.
Very
Yes, and
cool.
I think we wrote that grant in 2024, and they're doing. She's doing really good work, and all of this is hard work. There, and publishers know this, and editors know this. There's not a single thing that we do in local and hyperlocal news that's a given. It is all hard work, and you have to roll up your sleeves and do the behind the scenes work and get in the trenches and help people help themselves. It's a little bit like community organizing.
Right. Very cool. Carol, so I ask everybody this one too. If you could flash forward 5 years, I'd love you to tell me where you think the industry will be, and then like also you and Emerge
Sure.
Media. Where do you see the trends going from boots on the ground perspective? And yeah, what do you think about that?
For me and Emerge Media Group, news organizations, local and hyperlocal, in order to stay alive and thrive, they're always going to need operations and business help. Always. I think that it will become less and less affordable for them to have a dedicated staff person doing that. And so I think fractional services and collaborating on among news organizations on that part of your business will not go away. I think it'll probably be even in more demand. For the news industry itself, I would not be involved to the extent I am with Into Media Holdings in the local if I did not see that as a real pathway for the future of news, for getting it on streaming platforms, for getting away from DMAs and appointment TV and the way that visual news is consumed. So, and I have a lot of really good friends in, the TV industry. I just think that it is going to evolve into a streaming platform or something along those lines that we're doing it Into Media Holdings and with the local. I think that we cannot keep leaning into things that don't always work. And, my day job is trying to help organizations that are legacy or are starting over. At the same time, we have to think about new business models. And for me, that is Into Media Holdings and the local, and how to use an organization like that to help also shore up existing news organizations around the country. So I do see the news to streaming platform. And there's a lot of people who do, I'm not talking just about like somebody who does a news show on YouTube or on TikTok. There's some really great creators out there, but nobody's doing it on a national scale attached to a streaming platform.
Right.
So I do think that that will evolve.
Very cool. Carol, this has been amazing. This has been a long one, and I knew it would be because every time we hop on, we just it's hard for me to hop off talking with you. I always have to go talk at my wife, and I mean talk at her afterwards because I have to give her the whole download and everything like that. But and hopefully everybody else got just as much value as I do from talking to you. Where can people find you online? What do you want me to link to?
Sure. LinkedIn is always the best place for me. And I don't post a lot, but I'm very responsive there. And then we just move the conversations over to my email and phone. So we'll do my LinkedIn, which I'll give you that and you can link to it. And my email, it's carol@emergemedia.group. And then Into Media Holdings will share that website. Also, I know you did with Todd probably in that episode 84, but let's do it again because I
Yep.
really want people to think about it and give feedback to me and to us on that concept. And the website is absolutely a deep dive on what that will look like.
Yeah, and also if you're listening, go back to the one with Todd. I also linked to the pilot that you ran in Colorado on YouTube, so
Yeah.
people can get an idea of what it could look like and everything like that in its kind of finished state.
It's great.
Carol,
And
yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say the thing about that and the pilot that we did in Colorado, and as we go into California and Georgia and elsewhere, and there may be other states that hear something and want us to come there because we also partner with colleges and universities in those states. We've done that in Colorado. We'll do that in California. We already are working with USC Annenberg School of Journalism on the local concept for California and elsewhere. So there are really, really great journalists available right now. And that is heart wrenching. And it also is promising for new concepts like the local and into media holdings. And so, we will have a spot for full time employees. And then we also will work with freelance and independent journalists as well as local news orgs in Montrose and elsewhere. So, yeah,
Awesome.
thank you, Paul. You do amazing work. I
Oh, thank you.
have not listened to a single one of your podcasts that I haven't enjoyed. I know you're getting close to number 100, so
Yeah,
con-
I am very quickly here. I know. It's crazy. Thank you so
some great
much
work.
for saying that. It's mostly on the guests. If you look at the waveform after, like the audio files, it's like 10% me and like 90% the person talking. So credit goes to the people out there doing the work and everything.
Well, thanks
Uh,
for joining us and giving everybody a platform to amplify their work.
Very cool. All right, Carol, thank you so much. Have a great day.